You're useless. You can't be counted on. My son-in-law barked, loud enough that the neighbors in Maplewood probably heard. It wasn't the first time Greg had let his temper loose on a holiday, but this time, the words hung in the smoky air, sharp as broken glass. The ruined turkey on the counter was just the latest excuse. I stood there, oven mitts dangling, staring at what used to be the centerpiece of our family's Thanksgiving, now a blackened, smoking disaster. Behind Greg in the kitchen doorway, my daughter Lindsay covered her mouth in dismay. My grandkids, Molly and Ethan, stood frozen, wide-eyed, their dreams of pumpkin pie and family laughter dashed in a cloud of burnt stuffing. Even my sister, Betty, was speechless, her usual gentle humor nowhere to be found. The smoke alarm wailed overhead. Greg slammed the oven door, sending a puff of gray clouds rolling over the counters and up toward the ceiling. The whole scene might have been comical if it hadn't hurt so much. I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm sorry. I must have dozed off. My phone battery died. The timer never went off. Sorry doesn't fix Thanksgiving, Walter. Greg snapped, his face blotched red. We have 20 guests coming in less than 2 hours, and now this. Lindsay rushed to my side, ever the peacemaker. Dad, it's all right, we'll figure something out. But Greg wasn't hearing any of it. He grabbed the turkey by one charred leg, hurled it toward the trash can, missed, and sent a spray of grease and stuffing splattering across the tile. Every single time we count on you, something goes wrong. Why do I let you touch anything important? My heart thumped in my chest. I could see Molly's eyes filling with tears, Ethan hugging his mom's leg. Betty started opening windows to clear the haze. Nobody moved to turn off the still blaring smoke alarm. I said I was sorry. I repeated. There was a tightness in my throat that made it hard to swallow. I tried to stand up straighter, tried to remember that I'd spent nearly 70 years making a living, raising a family, surviving worse than a burnt bird. But Greg was on a roll. You think throwing money at things solves everything? Not this time, Walter. Your checkbook can't save Thanksgiving. Lindsay's cheeks were wet now. Stop it, Greg, that's enough. But it wasn't enough for him. I watched him hurl insults the way he used to toss empty beer cans on Sundays, careless and full of bitterness. You promise things you can't deliver. You pretend to be everyone's hero, but when it really matters, when people are counting on you, you let us down. His words stung more than the smoke in my eyes. All the old memories tumbled through my mind, the nights Greg had called me from some emergency, voice shaking, asking for help to cover the mortgage. The time Lindsay needed money for their boys' hospital bills, every loan, every favor. That had never been paid back, but always expected, because that's what family does. But family isn't supposed to turn on you for one mistake. I looked down at my shaking hands, still flecked with grease. This wasn't about a turkey. It was about years of keeping silent, about letting myself be blamed for problems I hadn't created, about being the one everyone leans on, until they decide I'm too old, too slow, too inconvenient. Outside, a car pulled into the driveway. The first guests early. Greg shot me a look that could have peeled paint. Go clean up. And stay out of the way, will you? I started to answer. Honestly, I'm not even sure what I would have said. But then Lindsay's hand found mine, squeezing hard, her voice low. Dad, don't go. We need you here. And as I stood there in the smoky, ruined kitchen of my daughter's home in Maplewood, I realized this holiday was about more than one ruined meal. It was about respect. About what it really means to be family. Greg might think he could talk to me any way he wanted. He might think he could erase years of sacrifice with a few cruel words. But he was wrong. I wasn't about to disappear. Not now. Not ever. The house filled up quickly, and the smoke alarm finally silenced after Lindsay climbed onto a chair with a broom handle and jabbed the test button. The air cleared a little, but the tension stuck around, thicker than the haze. Aunt Betty corralled the kids onto the porch, trying to distract them with stories about her childhood in rural Indiana. Molly wanted to know if there were turkeys there too. Meanwhile, I found myself alone in the bathroom, scrubbing black stains from my hands and staring at my reflection. 70 years old, a little stooped, a little gray, but not so useless as Greg seemed to think. My hands shook more from anger than age. I replayed the kitchen scene over and over. How quickly kindness could turn to accusation, gratitude to contempt. A gentle knock on the door made me jump. "Dad, it's just me," Lindsay called softly. I opened the door. Her eyes were puffy, but she offered a tired smile. "You don't have to let him talk to you like that," she whispered. I shrugged, not wanting to put more of a burden on her. "He's just angry. We've all been there." She hugged me, holding on a second longer than usual. "I'm sorry, Dad. He's under a lot of pressure. Work, the house, the kids." She shook her head, as if apologizing for the whole world. I almost told her, right then, about the late-night calls from Greg. The desperate texts. The money quietly transferred to keep their lights on, to pay off that second mortgage, to cover the therapy bills when Ethan needed help with his speech. I'd always done it quietly, letting Greg keep his pride. That's what a real father-in-law does, right? But Lindsay didn't need more guilt, so I just squeezed her shoulder and tried to smile. "We'll get through tonight. Maybe we'll even laugh about it someday." But laughter was in short supply. Back in the kitchen, Greg was frantically Googling delivery options. "Everything's closed," he shouted into his phone, not caring that the guests could hear. "You can't even get rotisserie chicken after 3 on Thanksgiving in this town." Betty poked her head inside. "Maybe we should order Chinese? That's what my friend did last year when her husband set the ham on fire." "No!" Greg snapped, spinning toward her. "We're not eating takeout on Thanksgiving. This was supposed to be perfect." His glare landed on me again, sharp and mean. I looked past him, out the window at the backyard where the neighbor kids were tossing a football. My grandkids should have been out there, but instead they were huddled with Betty, watching cartoons on her iPad, too scared to come inside. A knock at the door. The first wave of guests, Lindsay's cousin Mark and his wife, Cheryl, arrived, bearing a sweet potato casserole and a look of confusion. "Is something burning?" Mark asked, sniffing the air. Greg forced a smile. "Just a little kitchen mishap. We're improvising." Cheryl set her casserole on the counter, eyes landing on the blackened roasting pan. "That's all right, honey. The first Thanksgiving after my dad passed, my mom burned the stuffing and we all ate cereal." Mark grinned. "Thanksgiving isn't about the turkey, right? It's about family." Greg didn't reply. He stomped out to the garage, muttering about needing to check the fuse box, another excuse to get away from the disaster. The house began to fill with voices, the clatter of dishes, nervous laughter. I busied myself pouring drinks, handing out sodas to the kids, pouring wine for Betty and the aunts. Lindsay moved through the crowd, apologizing for the unusual dinner and reassuring everyone that it would be a night to remember. All the while, I kept hearing Greg's voice in my head, "You're a burden. You can't do anything right." I thought about the first time he called me for help, 2 years after they got married, when he'd lost his job at the insurance agency. He came to me with his head down, asking if I could float them $5,000. Just for a couple of months. Of course, I said yes. Then it was the car. Then the kids' dental bills. And every time, I promised myself it was the last time. But it never was. Family isn't about keeping score, my late wife Joan used to say. But family isn't supposed to be about using people either. The front door opened again. This time, it was Greg, his face stormy. He pulled Lindsay aside, his voice low but his frustration loud enough to feel like thunder. I tried to mind my own business, but I heard snippets. "Why does he always have to ruin things? Your dad is always the victim, somehow. I felt the sting again, deep in my gut. Betty caught my eye from the hallway. You all right? She mouthed. I nodded, but inside I was churning. Suddenly, a voice cut through the noise. Mark, the cousin, was telling a story about the year their dog ate the Christmas ham, and laughter broke out, genuine and bright. For a moment, the tension faded, replaced by something warmer. Maybe, I thought, there was still time to save the day. Or maybe it was finally time for the truth to come out. The living room buzzed with awkward small talk and forced cheer. Old family friends from down the street had arrived, Mr. and Mrs. Doyle, who always brought a pecan pie, and sweet old Mrs. Crawford, whose hearing aid whistled softly in the background. The usual holiday warmth was missing, replaced by a jittery energy as people eyed the kitchen, waiting for some miracle to emerge from behind the swinging door. I caught snippets of conversation as I refilled water glasses and tried to be helpful. Heard there was a little kitchen accident. Maybe they'll order barbecue this year. Wouldn't that be a riot? I hope Lindsay's okay. She looked a little teary. Every so often, Greg would stomp through, muttering into his phone, his face set in a mask of frustration. Lindsay kept her chin up, her voice calm as she assured the guests that dinner would happen, somehow. Aunt Betty made the rounds, telling stories from our childhood. Did you know Walter once saved an entire barn full of piglets from a flood when he was 12? She said, her voice loud enough for the next room. He's always been reliable, that one. Never met a problem he couldn't fix. Her words stung, not because they weren't true, but because I felt 100 miles from reliable in that moment. I drifted to the window, watching dusk settle over Maplewood, the porch lights winking on all up and down the block. I remembered 100 holiday evenings like this, Joan bustling around the kitchen, laughter echoing down the hall, the smell of roasting turkey and cinnamon filling every room. Joan had always been the heart of these gatherings. Since she passed, I'd tried my best to keep traditions alive. I wanted my grandkids to have those same golden memories. I wanted my daughter to feel her mother's warmth in every detail. But now, all I could see was Greg's angry face, his words bouncing around my head like stones, useless. Can't be relied on. Always messing things up. I sat on the edge of the stairs, closing my eyes for just a second. The flashbacks came without warning. 2017. Greg knocking at my apartment door, panic in his eyes. Walter, I know it's a lot, but the bank's going to take the house if we can't come up with $10,000 by Friday. Please, I'll pay you back the second my bonus comes in. He'd cried then. I'd written the check, told him to keep his head up, told Lindsay everything would be all right. 2019. Molly's emergency surgery. The insurance wouldn't cover all of it. Greg again, voice shaking. Dad, I don't know who else to call. Another $6,000. I never said no. 2021. Car repairs, heating bills, a leaky roof, summer camp for Ethan. Always another favor. Always a promise to repay. Never once had I mentioned the total, never once kept a record on paper, but the sum was there, in my heart. Not because I wanted it back. Just because I wanted someone to notice. I opened my eyes and the living room was spinning with movement again. Kids running up and down the hall. Laughter mixed with nervous whispers. The moment Greg re-entered the kitchen, he caught me by the coffee pot, his voice low and venomous. You know, Lindsay's too soft to say it, but this is the last time. No more letting you ruin holidays. No more covering for you. He took a step closer. If you really cared, you just step back. Let someone else handle things. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the mug. For a moment, I thought about leaving, just walking out the door, letting them fix Thanksgiving without me. But then Molly poked her head in, her cheeks still pink from running around with her cousins. Grandpa, can you read me the Thanksgiving story before dinner? She didn't care about the turkey. She didn't care about the disaster. She just wanted her grandpa. I knelt beside her, forcing a smile. Of course, sweetheart. Go pick it out, I'll be right there. I caught Lindsay's eye across the kitchen. She gave me a watery smile, mouthed, thank you. Suddenly it was all clear. I wasn't here to be perfect. I wasn't here to save the day with money or meals. I was here because I was family. As I followed Molly into the living room, I heard Betty's voice trailing after us. It'll be all right, Walt. Family always finds a way. Maybe she was right. Molly perched on the faded arm of the living room sofa, clutching a children's picture book about pilgrims and pumpkin pie. Ethan squeezed in beside her, and soon a small cluster of grandkids gathered, grateful for a distraction from the kitchen tension. I started reading, voice slow and steady, letting the warm routine calm us all. As the story ended, I looked up to see more relatives filling the living room, cousins, aunts, and Lindsay's old college roommate from Chicago. They'd all come for family, for comfort, not for a perfect dinner. For a moment, laughter and childhood questions filled the room. But the fragile peace didn't last. From the kitchen, a crash echoed. Greg had slammed a drawer. His voice snapped through the noise. You kids better keep it down. Some of us are trying to salvage what's left of this dinner. Betty rolled her eyes. It's Thanksgiving, not the stock exchange, Greg. Why don't you have a glass of wine and relax a little? He ignored her, pacing in and out of the kitchen, phone in hand, still desperately searching for a solution. I could see the guests growing uncomfortable, glancing at their watches, trying to make small talk about sports or weather. The children sensed the mood, growing quiet. Lindsay tried to steady the ship, arranging side dishes on the dining room table. She greeted every guest, hugged the older ones, made sure every coat was hung and every dish was topped with foil to keep warm. She whispered to me, We'll eat what we have. It'll be fine. But Greg was losing his grip. He cornered Lindsay by the hallway. This is a disaster. Your father ruined everything. Why do we keep letting him near important stuff? I told you, next year we're catering. His words were meant for Lindsay, but half the room heard him. There was a painful silence, as if even the house itself was holding its breath. Lindsay tried to soothe him, but he pulled away, frustration boiling over. I'd had enough. I walked into the kitchen, past the nervous aunts and startled cousins. I set the children's book down and faced Greg squarely. Greg, can we talk? Outside, maybe. He glared at me, chest puffed out, but finally followed me onto the back porch. The cold night air shocked us both into a tense silence. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Across the yard, I saw the neighbors lighting sparklers with their own guests, laughing and embracing, their windows glowing with golden light. Finally, I found my voice. You're angry, Greg? I get it. This isn't how anyone pictured today. But that doesn't give you the right to talk to me, or Lindsay, like that. He scowled. You let us down. You always say you'll help, but something always goes wrong. The turkey was just the last straw. I'm tired of cleaning up your messes, Walter. I felt something harden inside me. Let me ask you something, I said, voice low but steady. When you needed help with the house payment 2 years ago, who did you call? When Molly was in the hospital, who covered the bills? When your car died, who drove across town in a snowstorm to bail you out? Greg's eyes narrowed. That's different. That was family. Exactly, I interrupted, my voice rising. Family. I never asked for anything back. Never made you feel small for needing help. That's what family is. We show up. We forgive mistakes. We don't keep score. For the first time all night, Greg was silent. I took a shaky breath. You think I ruined Thanksgiving because I burned a turkey? You've got it backwards, son. What ruins a holiday isn't bad food, it's bad feeling. It's people forgetting how much they owe each other. Inside, I could see Betty watching us from the window, her face pale with worry. The living room behind her was crowded, but the whole house seemed to lean in, waiting for what came next. Greg looked away. I just wanted things to be perfect. Perfect? I shook my head gently. Life isn't perfect, Greg. Not a single holiday I ever had with Joan was perfect. But they were ours. They were full of love, and sometimes a little chaos. He crossed his arms, staring at the ground. The bravado was gone. For the first time, I saw a flicker of shame cross his face. Go inside, I said softly. Eat with your family. We'll make it through. We always do. He nodded stiffly, not meeting my eyes, and went back in. I lingered outside, letting the cold air bite my cheeks, feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. Maybe I hadn't fixed the turkey, but I'd finally said what needed saying. I went back in, and the warmth of the house and the hopeful smiles of my grandkids greeted me. Thanksgiving wasn't lost yet. Inside, the house felt changed, not calmer, but charged with something new, something honest. Maybe confrontation wasn't so bad after all. The air was heavy with the scent of burned turkey, but I caught the aroma of cinnamon from Cheryl's sweet potato casserole and the sharp tang of cranberry sauce. The clatter and chatter picked up again as people tried to shake off the tension. I moved quietly through the crowd, checking on the grandkids, helping Betty refill the punch bowl, and sharing a few stories with the cousins who'd gathered near the piano. They asked about my fishing trips, about how I met Joan, about growing up in Indiana before moving to Maplewood. The questions felt genuine, almost like they were searching for roots beneath all the noise and chaos. I caught glimpses of Greg and Lindsay in the dining room. Greg's shoulders had slumped, and Lindsay's voice was soft, but not defeated. There was an edge of something strong in her eyes. She'd seen him lose his temper before, but now she was standing a little straighter, no longer making excuses for his anger. Betty caught my eye and gave a small nod, as if to say, "That's my niece." At last, dinner began, not the grand meal we'd planned, but a patchwork of side dishes, Betty's ham from the freezer, a half-eaten rotisserie chicken that Mark's wife had brought, just in case. The kids were thrilled by the novelty. Molly declared it the best Thanksgiving ever, because we got to eat dessert first. People crowded around the table, making room for extra chairs, laughing as they jostled elbows. The food wasn't fancy, but the spirit was coming back. Someone put on a playlist of classic songs, Elvis and Aretha Franklin, and soon even Mrs. Doyle was tapping her fork in time to the beat. I took my seat at the end of the table, and for the first time that day, felt a wave of peace wash over me. All those years of giving, all the times I'd helped, all the sacrifices, they meant something. Maybe nobody had kept track, but I knew what I'd done. More importantly, I knew why I did it. Greg was quiet, but he glanced at me now and then, his anger cooled, replaced by something more complicated. I wondered if he was finally seeing the whole picture. After the first round of food, Lindsay stood and raised her glass. "I want to say something," she began. The chatter faded. "Today didn't go as planned. But I'm grateful. Grateful that my dad is here, that he never lets anything, burned turkey or not, keep him from showing up for us." She looked at me, her voice steady. "He's always there when we need him, whether it's fixing a leaky faucet, watching the kids at the last minute, or helping us when times are hard. I know I don't say thank you enough, Dad, but I am thankful. Every day." The guests nodded, raising their glasses with murmurs of, "Hear, hear," and, "To Walter." I felt a lump in my throat. I was about to say something, but before I could, Greg stood up. His voice trembled, but he forced the words out. "I owe you an apology, Walter. And you, Lindsay? I let my frustration get the better of me. This whole week, I've been worried about work, about money, about being good enough for this family. I shouldn't have taken it out on you. Especially not today." He looked at the others, eyes shining. "Walter's done more for me than I can ever repay. More than anyone in my own family ever did. I lost sight of that. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Betty raised her glass. To second chances, and to family, no matter how imperfect. Everyone laughed. Molly banged her spoon on the table in approval. The tension broke, replaced by real warmth. The rest of dinner was better than I dared hope. People swapped stories about holiday disasters past: a burned Christmas ham, a forgotten birthday cake, a Thanksgiving where the power went out and everyone ate by candlelight. Every story was a reminder that perfect wasn't the point. Being together was. After dinner, the grandkids dragged me into the living room to help them build a fort out of couch cushions. Betty helped Lindsay in the kitchen, cleaning up what they could, while Greg refilled water glasses and fetched pie slices for the aunts. Even the cranky old dog lay contentedly at my feet. Later, as the house began to empty and coats were gathered from the closet, I watched my family move through the rooms. There were hugs and promises to call more often, leftover containers pressed into grateful hands, a final toast to health and happiness. I realized something important that night. Sometimes you don't get the holiday you plan. Sometimes you get the holiday you need. And sometimes, that's even better. Long after the guests had left and the kitchen was cleaned up, the house finally fell quiet. Lindsay moved through the dim dining room, gathering stray glasses and folding napkins with a soft, tired smile. I watched her from the living room, where Ethan and Molly had fallen asleep beside the remnants of our pillow fort. Even the old dog was snoring gently, tail thumping every so often as if chasing some happy dream. Greg stood by the front window, hands deep in his pockets, staring out into the night. I could see his reflection, shoulders slumped, a man weighing his words and his mistakes. He looked older than I remembered, but also more honest. Maybe tonight had changed him. Betty sat beside me, her knitting needles clicking quietly. "You did good, Walt," she said, her voice gentle. "It takes guts to stand up for yourself after all these years." I nodded, feeling both lighter and heavier at once. There was relief, yes, but also a new ache, a sadness for all the years I'd let others define my worth, for all the times I'd swallowed her to keep the peace. But as I looked at the family around me, I realized something else had happened tonight. I'd finally spoken my truth, and they had listened. Greg eventually joined me, easing down onto the couch with a long sigh. For a moment, we sat in silence, listening to the old house settle and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "Walter," he began, voice low, "I was wrong. About a lot of things." I waited, not wanting to fill the space with platitudes or easy forgiveness. I wanted to hear what he really meant. He rubbed his face, looking at his sleeping children. "When my dad left, I was 13. I spent my whole life trying to prove I could hold a family together. Maybe that's why I wanted everything perfect tonight. I thought if the food in the house and the schedule were flawless, nobody would notice how scared I am sometimes. About money, about work, about being good enough." He shook his head. "I'm sorry for all the times I leaned on you and then acted like you didn't matter. You matter, Walter. You always have." I felt something loosen inside me, a knot that had been there for years. I put a hand on his shoulder. "Greg, nobody's perfect. Not you, not me, not anyone who's ever tried to make a home out of hope and hard work." We sat like that for a while, the silence comfortable for the first time all night. He nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you? For everything. For being here, for not giving up on us, even when I probably deserved it." A door creaked, and Lindsay appeared, hair falling loose, dark circles under her eyes, but a new confidence in her step. She smiled, a real one, and sat on the arm of the couch, pulling Greg close. "We're lucky, you know," she whispered. "Lucky to have each other. Lucky to have you, Dad." For a long moment, we just sat there in the dim light, the three of us. No accusations, no keeping score, just gratitude for the imperfect miracle of family. As midnight crept closer, Betty yawned and disappeared upstairs, and Greg helped carry the kids to bed. I tidied up the last of the dishes and stood alone in the kitchen, looking out at the quiet street, the porch light glowing like a beacon. I thought about Joan, how she'd have handled tonight with humor and a gentle nudge toward forgiveness. I whispered a thank you to her, wherever she was, for teaching me what mattered most, not the turkey, not the money, not the mistakes, but the love you keep giving, no matter how many times life knocks you off your feet. When I finally climbed into bed that night, the ache in my bones felt softer, less sharp. I was tired, yes, but it was a good tired, a tired that comes from fighting for something worth saving. And as I drifted off to sleep, I realized this Thanksgiving had given me more than I'd ever expected. It gave me my family, a little battered but still together. It gave me my dignity, restored after years of silence. And it gave me hope, that maybe, just maybe, the best years were still ahead. Sunrise in Maplewood painted the sky with soft gold and pink, filtering through the kitchen window as I brewed a pot of coffee. The house was quiet except for the gentle clatter of dishes as Lindsay slipped in behind me, tying her robe and rubbing her eyes. She smiled sleepily and leaned her head on my shoulder. "Morning, Dad," she said softly. "I hope you slept all right." I poured her a cup, and we sat at the small kitchen table, the remains of the holiday, crumbs, laughter, a sense of healing, still lingering in the air. In the living room, I could hear Betty humming as she folded up the last of the pillow fort. The dog yawned and thumped his tail on the floor. We sat in a comfortable silence, sipping coffee, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I looked at my daughter, the lines of worry already softening, a hint of peace returning to her face, and felt that old ache of pride. She'd weathered storms before, but last night she'd done it with grace I'd almost forgotten she had. "Thank you, Dad," Lindsay said, breaking the quiet. "For standing up for yourself. For all the years you stood up for us, even when nobody noticed. I'm sorry I let Greg talk to you like that. I should have said something sooner." I squeezed her hand. "You don't have to apologize. Life's messy. Families are messy. What matters is we stick together." The coffee warmed me from the inside out, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Greg, not at myself, not at anyone. I was just grateful that the truth had finally been spoken, grateful that forgiveness still had a place at our table. A few minutes later, Greg came into the kitchen, freshly showered, hair still damp, carrying a plate of reheated pie. He gave me a sheepish smile. "Morning, Walter. Mind if I join you?" "Of course not," I said, gesturing to the empty chair. He sat, looking from Lindsay to me, then down at his hands. "I've been thinking a lot about last night," he started. "I've never really had a family that forgave mistakes, or gave second chances. I guess I was scared to lose what I have here. I took it out on you, and that wasn't fair." Lindsay reached for his hand, and for the first time in a long time, I saw hope in Greg's eyes. Maybe he could change. Maybe we all could. We talked quietly, honestly, about what family really meant, about burdens and help, pride and humility, about how sometimes just showing up is the greatest act of love there is. We made plans for Christmas, simple, nothing fancy, just time together. Greg promised to help cook next time, joking that at least if something burned, we'd be in it together. After breakfast, the house slowly woke up. Molly and Ethan tumbled down the stairs, hungry and full of questions about pie for breakfast. Betty gathered her bags, ready to drive back to Indiana, hugging each of us extra tight. Before she left, she whispered in my ear, "You did good, Walt. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." As I stood on the porch, watching Betty drive away, I felt the sharp winter air fill my lungs. The neighborhood was already alive, neighbors waving, kids riding bikes, someone stringing up early Christmas lights across the street. Lindsay joined me, wrapping her arm through mine. We stood there for a long moment, not speaking, just watching the world wake up. "You know," she said, "last night was hard. But I think it's exactly what we needed. I nodded, the sunlight warming my face. Life's not about perfect moments. It's about how we come back from the hard ones. It's about forgiving, starting over, and remembering we belong to each other. Inside, Greg was helping the kids build a new fort. Laughter drifted through the windows, lighter than it had sounded in a long time. I realized the bitterness of yesterday was gone, replaced by something stronger, a sense of belonging, of being seen, of finally being understood. Maybe I'd burned the turkey. Maybe I'd made mistakes. But I'd also built a family that could face the truth and come out stronger for it. As the morning sun rose higher, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I was still Grandpa Walter, still sometimes stubborn, still sometimes clumsy. But I was needed. I was loved. And I was, finally, enough. Thanksgiving in Maplewood would be remembered not for a perfect meal, but for the day when honesty, forgiveness, and real gratitude brought a family back together. And for that, I would always be thankful.